The problem isn't socialism. The problem is there's not enough socialism.
You've said capitalism twice in a sort of a dismissive tone, Gloria. I'm just wondering, are you not a fan of capitalism, or do you prefer socialism, communism?
Well, I am a socialist.
Okay,
Absolutely. Yes.
So
and
if we look at the socialist states in the world today, Venezuela, North Korea, Cuba, is that the kind of society you would think is ideal?
Well, every country has to have their own society based on their own conditions and characteristics. But what we say as socialists is that the wealth, that the working class, all these people here who are part of the working class, those in the United States, instead of enriching a family like the Waltons, which owns as much wealth as 62 million Americans, while their workers make minimum wage, maximum $10 an hour, we say all that wealth should be created by those who make it. Yeah, we're socialists. And the problem with Venezuela, besides the huge economic war by the U.S. government and continued threats of coup and attempts at coup, the problem isn't socialism. The problem is there's not enough socialism.
Really?
Absolutely. It's still a capitalist country. I've been there many times. And the fact that they're going to create now a goal of 3 million homes, already 2 million built for poor people, meaning that they will serve 15 million, half the population of Venezuela, in a truly affordable, almost free housing. We can't even hope for that right now in the U.S.
And yet we see so much illegal immigration from so many countries around the world going to the U.S., which is probably the ultimate capitalist society in the world.
Well, we can never talk about the immigration question without understanding what U.S. capital has done to the world. I have been to Iraq in the time of sanctions when more than 1 million people died. I have been to many, many countries and seen the effects of U.S. policy, of a country like Libya destroyed and refugees being created by the hundreds of thousands. Where are they supposed to go? People say, America, America, because they see the image. They don't really know how hard it will be, but there's more opportunity than in their countries that have been bombed to destruction.
Well, one last question, Gloria, and I really appreciate your time, by the way, especially in the sweltering Mexican sun. When it comes to the final destination of this migrant caravan, or caravans plural, what do you think is going to happen on the U.S. border? President Trump has already said, I think 5,200 troops have been deployed. The border will be shut down if necessary. I guess what I'm saying is, could this all be a fool's errand, all the blood, sweat, and tears that has gone into this trek, if they don't get into the United States in the first place?
Well, we believe that there will be many, many people joining them at the border to welcome them and to oppose openly Trump's threats and mobilization of what he's saying will be 15,000 troops. It's really outrageous and unprecedented. Maybe there have been a couple times in history where troops have been used potentially against the people. The people, not only citizen, not only immigrant, but any human being. And we reject that. And we're going to be mobilizing along with many others along the border states, wherever the people come in, to say, welcome. We want you here. We want you to live in peace.
But since the inception of nations isn't the very definition of a nation securing your borders, because as I said before, without secure borders, do you really have a nation?
Yeah, and the U.S. invaded Dominican Republic in 1965, and the U.S. invaded Cuba in 1961 and attempted in 62, and the U.S. invaded Panama in 1989. And
but I'm speaking in terms of the illegal immigrant question.
We just spoke about how people leave their country to come to the U.S. after their countries have been destroyed. You know, my mother was from Mexico, and my mother was a permanent resident in the U.S. for 50 years, and she never wanted to become a citizen because she was too proud to be Mexican, and she always wanted to go home. The dream of the immigrants is to someday go home when there's peace and stability. That's what immigrants feel. They're torn from their country.
So they're just staying in the U.S. temporarily until things improve back home?
The nature of immigration is once you settle down, have a job, have kids. Well, most people stay, but I'm talking about that they don't want to leave their home. It's that they're forced to.
Okay, then. I guess, and I mean, so many of us have immigrant ties. My grandparents, they immigrated from Scotland after the Second World War, but again, it was by the book. It was done legally. If, you dispute that there's 290 criminals on this migrant march, Gloria, but you know, a lot of people say the vast majority are law-abiding, honest people, and I'll buy into that. But I think the moment you illegally cross into a country, aren't you by definition a criminal then?
Absolutely not. I just explained there's no legal process for immigrants. The process that was existing for asylum is now being wiped away. People are being criminalized for being immigrant. This is the problem. It's a political question. It's a political weapon being used. You know that if you are Cuban and you come into the United States because the U.S. has an economic war and a blockade against Cuba, and they want to point it out as a failure as a socialist country, if you're Cuban, you get all kinds of social services. You get immediate permission to work. It's a political weapon, immigration policy of the United States. And I have to say this, that there's a great deal of racism involved in the fact that they're Central American, people of color. You know, nobody mentions about the terrible situation for Haitians that are now going to be deported, those who were actually living in the U.S. before the earthquake took place in Haiti under the temporary protective status. He's just cut that off completely and forcing him into a situation of great violence thanks to U.S. policy, U.S. Marines, and the overthrow, for one instance, of President Aristide, who was elected by the people. But he was against what the U.S. wanted to do, which was economically dominate Haiti.
But economically, domestically speaking, the United States, Gloria, I understand that black unemployment rates, Latino unemployment rates, they're at an all-time low thanks to the Trump administration.
A recent study has shown that the economic growth and wealth is at the top, the 1%, the top 10%, and that there's great stagnation on the bottom, that people are working 2 and 3 jobs and barely getting by. We're seeing an explosion of homelessness as one indication of the poverty. It's a myth, really. It's all intended for the elections of November 6th, and I think part of Trump's threats is because he wants to really cement the super right wing, the racist element that partly elected him. And the rich, the bankers, the ones who he's benefiting with tax breaks and the corporations, it's really a class war, if you ask me. It's a class war, and there's more of us than them. And more people are starting to see. It's not just people like myself who are people of color who support immigrants. There's a lot of working class people across the board of every nationality who say, let them stop abusing them. Stop putting the children in cages. Children are right now in the Texas desert, in tents, under heat, treated like criminals.
All right, well, Gloria, we'll leave it there. I want to thank you for your time, and I hope you stay safe for the rest of the journey. Are you following them all the way to the final destination of the border?
Well, part way, we hope, and we will be back. We have to go back for a short time. But I'd like to say one thing about what you said about criminality. There is a higher incidence of crime among white people and other U.S.-born people than there are among the immigrant class. What the media does in the U.S. and Trump does the other day for the elections, he pointed out one immigrant from Latin America who had apparently killed 2 police. And they made that the touchstone for whoever would like to find an excuse to vote Republican. It's really disgusting. But there is less crime among immigrants. The media tells a different story.
Again, I just go back to with all the white supremacy in the U.S., all this terrible capitalism, all this crime committed by whites. It sounds like a place, if I was not in the U.S., I wouldn't want to immigrate to.
I live in San Francisco for 36 years, and I have never seen a more difficult situation with police killings, which you can see in many cities, record numbers of black and brown youth killed. We're seeing thousands of homeless in the street because the rent is $4,000 a month average for a 1-bedroom, and it's getting worse.
San Francisco is a very expensive place to stay. Why are they there then?
Because they're workers. You need workers everywhere. The people who are being evicted live there for generations. They're not allowed to live there anymore because they're not rich. It's happening in Los Angeles, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Chicago, Houston, Miami. Everywhere in the U.S. there's gentrification. What's happened in the last 30 years since Reagan and every subsequent presidency is that they're giving greater and greater tax breaks to the rich who now have trillions of dollars in wealth, and they're pouring it into real estate. That's why there's such a dislocation of residents and tenants.
Hey folks, for the latest news on the migrant caravan march to the United States, please visit caravanreports.com. That's caravanreports, plural.com.